Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Round the Horn. Today's guest is Jim Monaghan. Hello, Jim. How are you?
Mrowicki, good to see you. How are you, my brother?
Good. I'm good. How's things at WDHA?
Well, we're getting through. Things are obviously a little bit different these days, but we are getting through it.
Now, are you recording from home or are you doing it live still?
No, the morning show has been live in studio. Terry Carr's doing the midday show from home, and then the rest of the shows are being done on site. The weekends are pretty much the full-timers are covering those for the time being. So we're on a bit of a skeleton staff. Our sales department is all off-site. Our production department is split half and half. There's about maybe 7 of us who are still in the building on a daily basis.
Is it tough to talk on a microphone with a mask on?
I have a World War II Army gas mask in my office that I bring on from time to time that I use.
That's pretty funny. Well, we know you for a long time, but people out there may not be familiar with Jim Monaghan. So how about a little bit of the music bio first?
Well, it all started in a lot of listeners, people might know me from WDHA where I worked from January of 1980 to the fall of 98, and I covered a variety of different positions there. I did overnights. I was the music director for a while, produced morning and afternoon shows, was the sports director for a while, kind of did a bunch of different things. Worked for the AM side for a little while, worked on WDHA AM along with the great Ted Brown, which was quite an experience. And then after leaving NEW, I came to DHA, and that was Thanksgiving weekend of 1998. I've been there ever since.
Wow. Okay. What about before that? How'd you get into radio?
It kind of happened by accident. I had been I worked for what is now DHA's sister station, WMTR, when I was in high school. They were a local, still are, Morris County radio station, and they did a lot of high school sports. So I called in the scores for my high school's football team. And years ago, there was a requirement by the FCC that if your phone call was being taped, there had to be a beep in the background. And I didn't know this. I just knew that there was this annoying beep that I kept hearing. And so I remember one time calling in the score, and the guy on the other end of the phone said, "That's it?" I said, "Well, yeah, I thought I was just supposed to call in the score." He said, "No, we'd like a recap of the game as well." So I started writing out scripts, and then I would call into the station and go back in the car with my parents, and we'd turn on WMTR 1250 AM, and I could hear myself. And I thought, well, this is kind of cool.
Right.
Never really thinking that this was going to be something that I might want to do for a living. But when I got to college, I went to Fordham in the Bronx, and one of the very first things that I did was call the radio station. How do I get on the air? And you had to go through a series of workshops, and I guess the first thing they would have you do is one of the classical music shows that they did at the time. The programming then was much different than it is now. It was block programming with a variety of different things. There was classical, news, sports, top 40, country, bluegrass, you name it, it was on the air there. So about midway through college, I thought, I was an economics major, and I thought, I don't want to go to law school. I don't want to work in a bank. Maybe this radio thing is worth taking a shot at. So that's kind of how it happened.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, mine was kind of accidental as well, too. Let's get to baseball. That's what we're here for. Yes, I got mine, too. World Series ball from 1984. I don't even know who played that day, but I know it's real because it was rubbed up with the magic mud that they get from the banks of the Delaware.
This is a major league ball. It still has Bud Selig's name on it, so this has got to go back a few years. Well, I'm not sure. It's in shape, though.
Peter Ubroff on mine. So you play Little League?
Of course. Yep, played Little Leagues and Babe Ruth. I actually did not play baseball in high school, though. I played a year of football, and I played a year of basketball, but did not play baseball.
Okay.
Interestingly enough. But it was always my favorite sport growing up. And, followed the sport quite a bit. As I mentioned, telling you about a little bio information, I was the sports director at WNEW FM. So got to cover both the Mets and Yankees for a while in addition to some of the other sports. And as I said, it's always been my favorite sport. I played in a variety of men's leagues over the years and also on the NEW softball team. In fact, I sent you that picture, Clarence Clemens and me at a charity softball game. I want to say that was maybe 86 or 87.
Yeah,
When was Big Man's West?
Right.
When did that open?
Well, I think we did 86, and I was on Clarence's team for a while before we had our own Stone Pony team. But yeah, those were great times, that's for sure. Now, you didn't play in high school. What about college?
No, I was having knee operations in college. So,
okay.
oh, a medical wonder.
Can't pass through checkpoints at the airport too much, huh?
Well, pretty soon, because I'm going to need to have a third operation. I have a feeling they're going to put all kinds of different crap in my knee. So, yeah, I'm going to need some kind of disclaimer as I go through x-rays.
God bless. These days, what are you doing baseball-wise? I know you're a member of the New York Pro Scouts Association.
Yep, an associate scout with the Tampa Bay Rays under Lou Wieben. But, you know, other than that, I'm really not doing anything. I mean, who among us can? Usually at this time, I'd be out at some local high school game or maybe a college game with Seton Hall in the area. But we've been able to do nothing. I was supposed to be the high school pitching coach at Madison High School, but obviously that hasn't happened yet. So I'm basically sitting at home, spinning a baseball.
Well, growing up in this area, who were your favorite teams?
You know, I followed a lot of different teams over the years. Originally from New York City, but we lived outside of Philadelphia for a while. So I followed the Phillies, and when we moved back up here, gravitated to the Mets in 69 and 70. They were so much fun to watch. Was a big Mantle fan as a kid. One of my earliest memories is asking my dad to read me the box scores when Mantle and Maris had that historic run in 1961. Right. You know, I wanted to know, did Mickey hit one yesterday? But I vividly remember that, asking him that. But my dad was scouted. He grew up outside of Scranton in Pennsylvania. And at the time, the Scranton Red Sox were a minor league affiliate of Boston. So I've been rooting for the Red Sox for many years now in tribute to him because of that whole thing. Okay. I figured any team that was going to take an interest in my dad is worth rooting for.
Yeah, that's the reason why, because I've seen you in a Red Sox hat.
On more than one occasion, yes.
Exactly.
This Cardinals hat, by the way, is for the North Jersey Cardinals. It's a club organization that I've been coaching with now for the last year and a half.
Oh, great. And you're doing instruction every once in a while, too?
Well, I was until we went through all of this where the facilities are closed down. Working out of DBAT and Mountainside is where I've been doing my lessons. Okay. I've been doing that for a little over a year now down there. I had worked previously doing lessons up in Bergen County with Doug Sinella, who's also another member of the Pro Scouts in the area. Of course, Doug, longtime scout with the Cincinnati Reds. I still work with Doug doing some website stuff and social media things and their email marketing, that sort of thing. Doug I worked up with Doug
for the Yankees and the Mets, didn't he?
Pardon?
Doug played for the Yankees and the Mets.
He did. He played for both teams, was in big league camp, spring training with both teams, originally drafted by the Orioles and played in the Expos system as well.
Now, if I remember correctly, you were also involved with Rick Cerrone for a while.
Yes, I spent 2 years working in the Atlantic League with Rick and the Newark Bears. I was the director of community relations for a while, which means, well, we all did everything. We pulled tarp. I wore the mascot costume on more than one occasion. Lee, I think the only person on staff who never wore the Rip and Rupert costume was probably Rick. Everybody else at one point or another, from the general manager down to the interns, we all wore it.
Sad that they're knocking that down, huh?
It really is. You know, I remember when the stadium was first going up, I remember driving down Route 21, McCarter Highway in Newark, right. And the outfield fence had not been put up yet. And I stopped the car and I walked onto the field, and the turf had been laid down, the grass was down, but the stadium itself, none of the seats were finished. But I'm just thinking, wow, this is so cool. There's going to be baseball back in Newark. And for a while, it was very successful. It really was. But I know the team had some issues over the years, and unfortunately, ultimately folded. And I guess the stadium, I know it was being torn down. They were going to put up, I believe, some apartments and some shopping down there.
Right, right. Same thing, I think, is happening down in Camden. They're tearing that stadium down too.
Yes. Somerset Patriots are doing very well. Continue to draw. The Long Island Ducks still do very well. The league itself has been very strong. In fact, has a connection. A lot of fans will probably know that the Atlantic League was where Major League Baseball wanted to test the robo umpires. And there was also talk about moving the mound back to 65 feet, which thankfully they didn't do. The robotic umpires met with mixed reviews, shall we say, from guys I know who played in the league.
They also said that there might be a possibility of suggesting the umpire behind the plate move behind the mound.
It's awful tough to accurately call balls and strikes from there.
No, I did that in Little League a few times.
Yeah.
In fact, my umpiring career lasted all of 2 games because, first of all, I got too much stuff from the people in the stands. I'm going to be polite in that respect, but yeah, to me that's the toughest thing to do in baseball is to be an umpire. And I've got a good friend of mine who does a lot of high school games, so I get a lot of information from him. But he's had it as well too. He says people in the stands are just giving him too much grief, and it's not worth the money he's making.
There was, I think it was USADL. It was on one of their social media pages. It was like the Brady Bunch type thing with a bunch of different umpires holding up a sign. Did you see that?
Yeah,
Please
I think so, yeah.
Stay home.
Yes.
So mom can yell at us again. It was very, very funny. All umpires in gear, masks, the whole thing. It was very funny.
Yeah, I got to be friendly with a bunch of umpires, and I was lucky in high school when I was pitching that I knew a few of them from Babe Ruth and stuff like that. So they were familiar with what I did on the mound, and I was familiar with the way they called. But I tell you, to me, that's the hardest job, especially if you know some of the players, and it's amazing. In fact, when I was in the Frontier League for a short amount of time, we had high school umpires who had never seen a pro game before in their lives. So they weren't used to big players that were 6'4", 6'5" in their strike zones. And they just didn't like Yankees down in West Virginia. I mean, they're still fighting the Civil War.
One of the things that I did when I got into coaching at the high school level, I spent 2 years up at Don Bosco Prep in Ramsey for a while, was I told my players, you're only allowed to say 2 things to umpires: yes, sir, and no, sir. I don't want to hear anything else from you. I said, if anybody needs to talk to the umpire, let me do it, but I don't want anything with you. And there was one game, I remember one of our parents was starting to chirp from behind the dugout, and the umpire had a really, really short fuse. So I'm coaching. We had the first base dugout, and our parents are over there, and I'm coaching from the third base line, and I can hear this one dad, and he really hasn't said anything, but knowing the umpire as I did, I thought, something's going to happen here. So I just yell out from across the field, hey, we don't do that here. So when the inning ended and I came back to the dugout, I went over to the dad. I said, listen, I'm sorry I singled you out, but I know this ump, he has a really short fuse. I think he's about to blow, and I don't want it to be at us. He goes, no problem, coach. I completely understand. But the umpires have a terrible job. It's just so hard. You know, you have to be perfect from the time you start the game and then get better from there. And that's impossible.
Yeah, it's impossible most of the time. I'll tell you a funny story. I played an all-star game at Yankee Stadium. And, you know, you talk about hotheads and things like that. And at the time, they still had water coolers in the dugouts. And before the game, I talked to one of the guys who was, one of the field guys for the Yankees. And I went over to the water cooler and I saw it surrounded by wood. If you can imagine this. I said, what's with all the wood around the water cooler? He had one word to say, Billy. And since then, of course, they've gone to the Gatorade, but Billy was pretty famous for doing his shtick with the umpires. In fact, they just played the Pine Tar game again on TV a few days
Yeah.
ago. That was amazing. And if you look at bats today, some of them are even worse than what George Brett had at that time.
Sure.
You know, and you see uniforms being. I can really feel for equipment managers trying to get pine tar off a uniform. So, your favorite teams when you covered the Yankees and the Mets for WNAW-FM, did you get to meet a lot of the players?
Yeah. I was in the locker room a number of times in the mid '80s. That '86 to '88 era with the Mets. That was quite a bunch to try to follow.
Sure, yeah. And did you ever catch Keith Hernandez smoking in the dugout?
Yeah, they were very colorful, to say the least. You know, watching Derek Jeter's career from the early couple of years was a lot of fun to watch. Yeah, I won't go out and say, you know, I knew this guy was going to be a Hall of Famer, but you certainly knew that you had somebody special that you were watching.
Oh, absolutely right. And I look at some of the
my favorite opposing players to watch. There were two, actually. One was Bonds, who his early days with the Pittsburgh Pirates, I just thought he was probably the most complete player in the game. And then Griffey Jr. was just marvelous to watch play.
Great athletes. I don't think that Bonds needed the steroids, to tell you the truth.
I agree with you. I agree.
Sad era for all of us. You know, it was one day I was also at another All-Star game, but down in Philadelphia at the Vet. And I remember Pete Rose bouncing the baseball after the third out and it going up about 30 feet in the air. So when I was doing my warm-ups and I was going to be a reliever that day, so I'm running to get loose and everything, and you can feel the bounce in the turf. It was being like on the moon. You were going, it was every step was boom, and you were up in the air. But the thing was, I was running my poles in the outfield, and back then was Lenny Dykstra being the center fielder for the Phillies, and there was in center field a huge black spot. I said, "This is where he plays."
Yes.
It's colored with tobacco. But there's a guy that no doubt was on steroids. That's for sure.
There was a big difference in Lenny's size, that's for sure.
Yeah.
If you follow him on social media, you know he is still a character on Twitter.
No, I hear, and I read about the problems he had most recently. So, out of all the players you've ever met, nicest, the worst?
I've never met anybody who was particularly nasty. I did encounter Jim Rice one day, who this was in the visitors' locker room at Yankee Stadium, and I said, "Mr. Rice?" And he said, "No," and he just kept walking. If you didn't know him, he was very suspicious of the media because he was, I guess, concerned that comments would be taken out of context, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
Most of the guys are pretty nice. They really are. Jim Leyritz was probably one of the nicest guys I met. And I wasn't a huge fan of his as a player, but very, very easy to talk to. Darryl Strawberry, I've met in more recent years, and he was much different than he was as a player. He's extremely down to earth and easy to talk to.
He was great when I did a Make-A-Wish event with him. We had a kid that wanted to actually, his wish was to interview Darryl Strawberry. So we made the arrangements for Darryl to go to the Monmouth Mall and meet this kid, and he would interview him on a tape recorder, etc. Darryl showed up on time. He was great with the kid. He bought him a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, it couldn't have been any better. And definitely a gentleman, that's for sure.
You know, one of the things being in the media has taught me is those guys are trying to do a job. And there is an element of the media, and it's not everybody, but there's an element, and you're seeing this in politics these days to an extent as well. There's that gotcha. Everybody's trying to get that gotcha moment.
Sure, yes.
And I think the guy who plays the media perfectly is Bill Belichick. Now, I would not want to cover a Bill Belichick coach team because I would imagine it would be really hard. But there's a rule in interviewing somebody. Don't ask a yes or no question, because the answer that you get might just be yes or no. So
Right.
think of the number of times Bill's asked a question and he gives the yes or no answer. One of the things that he loves to do is, I already answered that. We're on to Cincinnati, that type of thing.
Right.
Where he just, if he deals with it once, that's it. I'm done with this. I'm going on. There's a lot of reporters who would love to have that gotcha moment with Belichick, and he just won't do it. But I think you see an element of that sometimes with the media, and I think that's part of the reason why players sometimes butt heads. Thus the Jim Rice thing that I said I encountered with him back in Yankee Stadium in the visitors' locker room some years ago. One of the things that I think has come out of this whole quarantine that we're in, and this goes for sports figures as well as musicians that I've seen a lot, is breaking down the barriers a little bit. You're seeing a lot of musicians doing these home concerts.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Pulling out a guitar or a keyboard, spending 20 minutes. Pete Yorn from up here, he's out in California now, but he's from up here in Morris County. He's been doing this for weeks, 10, 15 minutes, just continuing to break down the barriers. The guys in Shinedown have been doing this. A ton of them. I don't want to just mention, one or two, because I know I'll leave guys out, but
Yeah, right.
I think that's been really unique in the way that the barriers between fan and star, to use, I don't know if that's the right word or not,
Right.
being broken down. I'm seeing a number of baseball players are doing it, as well as hockey and football players too. Will Middlebrooks, in fact, tonight, the former Red Sox player, is going to be on his wife's Instagram live taking questions and answers.
Oh, that's great.
Follow Jared Carabas from Barstool. He's been doing rock, paper, scissors with dozens of me. It's hilarious. Really just kind of breaking down these whole barriers. And I think showing that the guys on these teams, they're human.
They're human, right? Exactly. Your buddy Mark McEwen was on our first episode, and he tells.
I did see that. It was good to see.
A great story about Joe DiMaggio. And he tells a story that people were trying to ask DiMaggio questions about baseball, and he doesn't want to talk about baseball. And Mark had this thing where he was trying to buy all the ties that Joe D wore out in public. And so they started talking about ties. So Mark was great. It was good to catch up with him. He's doing well, and it's great to see him doing so well after his stroke, especially.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite people in radio that I've worked with over the years.
Absolutely. Now let's go on to announcers, because we brought this up with a few people, and it's a good subject. Growing up, watching the Yankees and watching the Mets, you got a variety of great people that were in both markets for both teams. Any recollections?
Well, when we first moved back up here to New York, the classic Lindsey Nelson, Bob Murphy, Ralph Kiner trio was on. They don't make them like that anymore.
No.
They really do.
And they don't make jackets like Lindsey's anymore either. Although every once in a while I go to Goodwill and I see one of them. I say, that's a Lindsey Nelson jacket.
John Sterling is certainly an icon. I guess some of my favorites, Don Orsillo, I like a lot now with the Padres. Dave O'Brien, I think, is very, very good. I like Matt Vescursion. Can't get that name out.
Right.
I like
absolutely,
a lot. Dennis Eckersley, I know he's done some national broadcasts as well as some of the New England games, the Red Sox games up on the New England Sports Network. I think he's very funny and very entertaining. Hernandez is obviously very good. Howie Rose is very good. Now, there's a bunch of guys around.
That's a good team, really, especially with Darling, too.
I'm sorry?
That's a good team with Darling.
Yes. Yeah. Ron Darling's really good. One of the other guys who stands out is Al Leiter. I love listening to Al, especially when it comes to pitching.
Oh, yeah, he knows his stuff, that's for sure. Al is from my hometown now, Bayville. And we scouted his son a few times. And, there's Al in the back, and people are kind of afraid to even talk to him. I said hello just for a minute or so, but people say that he can go off on a tangent every once in a while.
Yes, Al is very conversational, to say the least. We had the same experience. A number of the games that I went to over the past 2 years were watching Jack, Al's son, and Jack's former high school teammate, Anthony Volpe, who ended up being the Yankees' first-round pick, watching the two of them play in high school. Anthony was probably the best high school infielder, hands-wise, I've ever seen. I could not get over how good his hands were. And obviously, Jack Leiter, a dominant high school pitcher.
No, absolutely. I mean, first game he threw at Vanderbilt, I think he threw a no-hitter.
It was, yeah, that was like watching men against boys. It really was.
Exactly. And he's not that big a guy either.
You know, the thing with Al that I noticed would be, and you mentioned him, you know, standing behind the game, behind the plate during games, Al would be just writing notes. Rarely said a word during the game.
No.
Taking some notes, you know, obviously to discuss with Jack on the way home some of the different things. But it was fun watching the dynamic between the two of them when Jack was pitching in high school.
Right. Exactly. Well, I think we're just about out of time, Jim. It's been really great to catch up with you, and we love to do this again sometime. That's for sure.
Lee, thank you. Always good to talk to you. By the way, I like Stella's new song. I played it on Sunday.
Oh, you did? Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's very good. It's a very good song.
Okay.
Lee's daughter, Stella, is a very good musician. Check her out.
We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.